She walked into the elegant music hall with her head down. Just another invisible worker in her faded uniform. They only noticed her when they needed someone to clean or someone to humiliate. But when they forced her to play the piano as a cruel joke, what happened next left the entire room speechless. By the time her fingers left the keys, the woman they had mocked became the woman they would never forget. Emily Johnson moved quietly between the polished marble columns of the Preston Music Conservatory. At 28, she wore the beige custodial uniform with quiet dignity, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. 3 years of working here, and most days she remained as invisible as the dust she removed from the antique picture frames. But Emily had a secret. Her hands, though roughened by cleaning chemicals, moved with a grace that might have seemed unusual to anyone who bothered to notice. In the reflection of a polished brass lamp, she sometimes saw herself as she once was, 15 years younger, seated at a piano. Her future stretched before her like an unwritten symphony. Emily, handle the reception area today. The foundation board is coming in, her supervisor called out. As she moved toward the grand reception area, Emily caught a glimpse of the magnificent Steinway in the corner. For just a moment, her expression shifted, a whisper of longing crossing her face before reality pulled her back. Victoria Parker, the conservatory director, strode through the reception area, her tailored suit projecting unquestionable authority. Those chairs need to be exactly 1 inch apart, not this haphazard arrangement, she instructed without looking at Emily. From across the room, Samantha Reed, the star piano instructor, observed with a barely concealed smirk. Victoria, do remind the staff to use service corridors when guests arrive. Last time I noticed some of them in plain sight during the Chopin competition. These small humiliations had become routine for Emily. But she carried something these people couldn't see. Something they couldn't imagine. Later, as Emily polished the brass handrail, she noticed a young student struggling with a difficult piano passage. Without thinking, she whispered, "Try releasing your wrist more on the arpeggios." Samantha appeared instantly. "Did you just try to instruct my student?" Her laugh was sharp as glass. "Please stick to what you know. Cleaning supplies and trash collection." What Samantha couldn't see was Emily's fingers moving imperceptibly against the railing, tracing the notes, perfecting the passage in a silent performance no one would witness. On the day of the annual fundraising gala, disaster struck. The centerpiece performer was rushed to the hospital with food poisoning. Samantha's panic echoed across the marble floor as she ended the call. "She can't perform. The gala starts in an hour." Victoria rushed toward her. "But she's our centerpiece. The Jefferson Foundation specifically requested Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody." Jason Miller, a young teaching assistant who had always shown Emily kindness, approached hesitantly. "Mrs. Parker, if I might make a suggestion, I've heard someone else play that piece quite brilliantly." "Who?" Victoria demanded. Jason's eyes drifted toward Emily. "I'm suggesting Emily." The silence that followed was deafening. Samantha recovered first, a laugh bursting from her lips. "The janitor? You can't be serious." "I've heard her playing after hours when she thought the building was empty," Jason continued. "She's remarkable." All eyes turned to Emily, who stood frozen, duster suspended in midair. "Is this true?" Victoria demanded. "You play piano?" Emily lowered the duster slowly. "Yes, ma'am." "And you think you could play Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody?" Samantha's tone made it clear how absurd she found the suggestion. Emily met Samantha's eyes directly. "Yes, ma'am, I can." Richard Taylor, chairman of the board, approached their circle. When he learned of the situation, he exchanged meaningful glances with Victoria and Samantha. "It might actually work to our advantage," Samantha whispered, not quietly enough. "We could present it as community outreach. If she's terrible, we make a self-deprecating joke. If she's passable, we look generous for giving the help a moment in the spotlight." Victoria's smile never reached her eyes as she turned to Emily. "You'll play tonight. One piece, the Liszt. And if I refuse," Emily's question hung in the air, "then we'll need to reassess whether your position here is still necessary. Budget cuts, you understand." The grand hall filled with the conservatory's most generous patrons, glittering under crystal chandeliers. In the wings, Emily stood alone, still in her beige uniform, her name tag pinned to her chest like a scarlet letter. Victoria tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a slight change to our program tonight. Our scheduled pianist had an emergency. However, in the spirit of our community outreach initiatives, one of our maintenance staff has volunteered to demonstrate how music touches all lives, regardless of background." Titters of laughter floated from the back of the room as Emily walked onto the stage, the spotlight harsh against her simple clothes. Samantha stood near the curtain, arms crossed, a satisfied smirk playing at her lips. Emily sat at the magnificent grand piano. Her hands hovered above the keys, trembling slightly. In the front row, Richard leaned toward his companion with a stage whisper. "This should be entertaining, if nothing else." Emily closed her eyes, shutting out the world that had tried so hard to erase her. In the darkness behind her eyelids, she remembered her grandmother's words. "Music isn't about who you are to the world. It's about who you are when the world falls away." Her fingers touched the keys. The first notes filled the hall. Not the hesitant attempts they expected, but confident, masterful tones that commanded attention. Emily's hands moved with precision and passion, telling through music the story she had never been allowed to tell in words. The whispers died. The smirks froze. 200 breathing souls fell completely silent. As the piece progressed, Emily's body swayed with the changing moods. The playful sections danced with whimsical grace. The thundering crescendos resonated against the very foundations of the hall. When Emily played the final chord, the hall remained suspended in silence for 3 heartbeats. Then it erupted. What followed changed everything. David Thompson, a respected conductor attending as a guest, made his way to the stage. "Young lady, where did you study?" "I didn't, sir. Not formally. My grandmother taught me. Margaret Johnson. Recognition dawned in David's eyes. Margaret Johnson. The Margaret Johnson, who played with the National Symphony? Emily nodded. She raised me after my parents died. We couldn't afford conservatory tuition, but she taught me everything she knew. The truth emerged like a butterfly from its chrysalis. Emily had been accepted to Juilliard 15 years ago, but stayed to care for her grandmother after a stroke. By the time her grandmother passed, there were medical bills, and the opportunity was gone. 3 months later, Emily walked through the same hallway she had once cleaned, now carrying sheet music instead of cleaning supplies. Her new position with the Jefferson Foundation's Music Within Reach program gave her the chance to work with students from backgrounds like her own. Talented kids for whom traditional paths seemed impossible. In the practice room, 8 teenagers waited for her, their faces a mix of hopeful and guarded. My grandmother used to say that music isn't about who you are to the world, Emily told them as she sat at the piano. It's about who you are when the world falls away. As she began to play, her students watched with widening eyes at what was possible. Emily finally understood. The greatest act of courage is simply being who you are, without apology, in a world that tried to make you invisible. How many Emilys walk among us, unnoticed? How many gifts remain hidden because we're too quick to judge by appearances? If this story touched you, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support helps us bring more of these powerful stories to light. Remember, sometimes the most beautiful music comes from the most unexpected places.